On the afternoon of May 25th, 2008, the citizens of Parkersburg and New Hartford, Iowa, would be faced with an absolute monster. An exceedingly powerful tornado, an EF5, would rampage throughout the area, destroying entire neighborhoods, businesses, and wreaking untold havoc. She's known as the 2008 Parkersburg-New Hartford tornado, and she's distinctive as both the last EF5 to strike Iowa as of the making of this video, as well as the only EF5 to strike in general in the year of 2008. Warning signs for coming problems started as early as May 18th that year. Meteorologists scanning the skies noticed that there was a pattern that would be indicative of pretty severe weather, though they weren't sure exactly how bad it would get at that point. There was a large-scale trough that they thought would move across the northern United States and was receiving a ton of moisture from the south. The atmosphere was becoming quite unstable, which is a classic setup for severe weather patterns over the plains. As they kept an eye on things, it only got worse. By May 21st, models displayed a violently strong and robust negatively tilted trough that was moving across the United States before stalling over the plains. Moderate instability was already in place, and they thought that would only get worse. The National Weather Service would indicate that this combination of things should be sufficient for a multiple-day threat for relatively widespread severe storms. And they weren't wrong. By May 25th, notices of moderate risk of severe weather were issued across multiple states: Kansas, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Texas, and even as far north as to cross national lines into the Canadian province of Ontario. The thunderstorms were bad enough, but what they were really worried about is possible tornadic activity, and their forecast had called for a low-level jet to transport a bunch of moisture northward into the severe weather, fueling it. But this low-level jet turned out to be way stronger than they initially believed it would be, meaning that this was a lot of moisture, just a lot of water, which is exactly what the storms needed to become insanely powerful. The instability was driven through the roof, and dew points were in the upper 70s. Meteorological models started showing discrete supercells moving east to northeast, and there wasn't really much outside interference that could stop them. There was nothing in the atmosphere that was effectively pushing back on their development, so they could get basically as strong as they felt like. At 12:43 p.m. on the 25th, the Storm Prediction Center identified that there was a rapidly moving and strong jet streak approaching from Minnesota into Iowa. By 3:50 p.m., the supercells were intensifying rapidly, causing the National Weather Service to upgrade watches all across the area. And then, alarmingly, a cluster of already very powerful supercells in northern Iowa interacted and merged into each other, forming into a descending reflectivity core, or DRC, sometimes called a blob. Basically, it's an area of enhanced radar reflectivity, and that generally means there's a lot going on in that particular spot, and you should probably be aware of it. At the same time, low-level rotation on the southern supercell involved in that particular merger began to increase, and it wouldn't be much longer until the tornado in question would rear her ugly head. The first tornado warning involving that particular spot was issued at 4:22 p.m., sent out to the Parkersburg area. About 25 minutes after that warning was issued, the tornado touched down, 2 miles south of Amplington, near the Butler and Grunder County line. She began to intensify very quickly, alarmingly quickly. She got really big, really strong, and insanely dangerous. She traveled through a series of farm fields at first, which, had she just stayed there, would have been the best case scenario, but that's not what she was going to do. That was not her interest at all. She trekked straight into Parkersburg at full tilt EF5 intensity, and turning into the insanely dangerous wedge-shaped tornado. ripping through the southern part of the town just before 5 p.m. She destroyed numerous homes and businesses, 2 banks, a high school, and basically, honestly, everything in the southern part of Parkersburg was just gone. There was really nothing left. And that included a very well-constructed metal frame industrial building. The frame was bent into a mangled mess, twisted beyond recognition. And again, it was metal. Oh no. Many of the homes that were taken by her had been bolted to their foundations, specifically to prevent them from being taken by a tornado, but that didn't matter to this one. She didn't care. That was not relevant, unfortunately. A rebar support that was set into the foundation of one home was snapped in half. Trees were knocked over and debarked, shrubs were ripped out of the ground, and the aforementioned high school was utterly trashed. Even reinforced concrete light poles that were near the school were snapped. As she exited the east side of the town, she would pass over a golf course, as well as a brand new subdivision. The homes there had been very well built, with at least one rated with above standard construction methods. But all of them were destroyed. Debris from the town was thrown all over the place, and investigators would discover it finely granulated into very small fragments. Everything was ripped apart, not just tossed. And she had been 7/10 of a mile wide as she passed through Parkersburg. 7 people would be killed in that town alone, several of which had taken shelter in their basements, the place where they figured they would be safe. But not from this one. But she wasn't finished. Oh no, she was just getting started. Silly. Oh, why would you think that? She got all this unyielding power, and she's gotta use it to destroy things. That's her whole thing. That's her job. She's got one job, and she's gonna do it. After leaving Parkersburg, she continued eastward straight towards New Hartford, and she didn't really appear to get any weaker at all, even in between towns. Most of the trees were completely gone, with pavement being ripped from the ground along Highway 57. The ground was scoured, with more rural homes also being completely destroyed, along with an entire granary. She entered New Hartford at EF5 strength, slamming straight into a housing development on the northern side of the town at 5:09 p.m. Once again, there were plenty of well-built homes in this area with anchor bolts, but once again, that didn't matter. They were completely ripped apart, vehicles thrown long distances, and at least one home in that area even had its basement ripped into and completely emptied out. That included the poor homeowner, who was killed. But as she left that town, she began to weaken dramatically. Everything kind of fell apart. She had maintained EF5 pretty much the whole time until this point. As she passed north of Waterloo and Cedar Falls, she shrunk back down to about 1/4 of a mile in width, but she continued to stir up some trouble in more rural areas. Damage in these spots was mixed, mostly minor and hardly worth talking about, but a few farms did sustain up to EF2 levels of damage. She did appear to be heading towards a town called Dunkerton, but right before she would have gotten there, she turned east-northeast, causing her to miss that town. That's a good thing she did, because about that time she grew up to 1.2 miles wide, way bigger than she had been before. But oddly, she wasn't that much stronger in the damage sense. There was only high-end EF2 damage in that spot. She was large, but not necessarily that powerful. Not like she had been, anyway. A few homes that were hit did see collapses of their exterior walls, but they weren't completely leveled. At that time, she appeared to be tracking towards Fairbank. But right before she would have entered that town, she lost all strength, completely disappearing, never to be seen again. In total, 7 were killed in Parkersburg and 2 in New Hartford, bringing the death toll up to 9. There were 70 reported injuries and $75 million in damages. 288 homes in Parkersburg alone were gone, 88 in New Hartford. And the National Weather Service estimated that this tornado hit peak winds of 205 miles per hour. Iowa Governor Chet Culver would declare Butler and Black Hawk counties disaster areas due to the storm. And she was the first, and so far last, EF5 tornado to hit Iowa since an F5 hit Jordan on June 13th, 1976. She was also the second deadliest in Iowa since official record-keeping began in 1950. And recovery efforts were hampered quite a bit just a week later. Parkersburg bounced back okay, all things considered. But New Hartford was another matter, because just a week after the tornado, they experienced record flooding that forced all their residents to evacuate. Many of the homes that had survived the tornado were heavily damaged by the flood, which resulted in heavy relief efforts provided by FEMA and the American Red Cross. The Red Cross in particular provided food assistance, and many of the affected residents had to temporarily dwell in FEMA-provided trailers. Some residents made an effort to repair their homes, but a lot of them left, since going through an EF5 tornado and then a flood within the span of about a week would be enough to drive anyone out of town. Like, honestly, we're not doing it anymore, guys. We're just not. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.